within to start seeing about allocating more resources to get this issue addressed. So hopefully this is not just the end, but this is the beginning of the end of getting this issue addressed. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I just also want to recognize our former Assemblyman Harvey Wiesenberg for being here. Thank you, Harvey. This row says reserved, but I don't think anyone's going to be using it. We'll be over here. So for those standing who want to have a seat, this row is open for you. And I'm now going to give this to Ryan McTiernan from the City of Long Beach, who's going to moderate tonight and kick it off to the panel to give that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you to the Senator and County Executive Laura Curran, the Long Beach City Council, Legislator Ford, and Assemblywoman Miller for making this possible. We're happy to have an expert panel here tonight who I'll introduce shortly. But first, we need to take care of some housekeeping. There will be a question and answer session following the presentations tonight. We expect a number of speakers, so if you wish to speak or ask questions at that time, please sign in at the front of the room right here. Speakers will be limited to 1 3-minute question and answer period. And now to our panel. I will introduce them to your left, from your left to your right. First, we have Paul Pontero, who is the Senior Water Resources Engineer at H2M, and will be providing our independent analysis. Next, we have our own John Mirando, the Long Beach Commissioner of Public Works. And we have Brad Hutton from the New York State Deputy Commissioner of Health. And then Lawrence Eisenstein, Nassau County Commissioner of Health. And lastly, Don Irwin, the Nassau County Director of Environmental Health. And with that, I will hand it off to John Mirando, our Public Works Commissioner.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Senator Kaminsky and Senator Missy Miller, and Legislator Ford, and our 2 council members, Melissa Moore and John Bender, for being here tonight. For those of you who were at the July 2nd City Council meeting, so the beginning of this will be repeat, but those that weren't here will give the information that they did that night, and those that weren't here will give some new information and updates on where we've come since then. Each month, the city takes 40 microbiological samples from sampling points throughout the city, 10 per week. The samples are taken from locations in a plan approved by the Nassau County Department of Health. In addition, the microbiological samples taken monthly from each well that was used during that month and quarterly from the storage tanks. These samples are tested for total coliforms, which can be indicators of fecal or E. coli. It takes 18 to 24 hours for samples to be analyzed once received at our certified lab. As to the timeline with the positive E. coli sample, on Tuesday, June 18th, water plant operators collected 10 samples from the distribution system and delivered these samples to Pace Analytical, a New York State certified lab that the city has engaged. Wednesday, June 19th, Pace Analytical notified the chief plant operator that a sample from Grand Boulevard sampling station tested positive for total coliforms, again an indication. All other 9 samples taken that day were negative, meaning there was no total coliforms in any of those samples. Based on the positive sample, Nassau County Department of Health regulations require the operator to collect a resample from that positive location, and 1 sample upstream and 1 sample downstream, and from 3 wells that were operational on the date of the positive sample, June 18th. Thursday, June 20th, the 3 resamples and well samples were taken and delivered to the lab for analysis. Friday, June 21 at 9:30 a.m., the lab notified the city that 1 of the resamples from the upstream resident tested positive for total coliforms and E. coli. The sample was from 421 Grand Boulevard. The staff met with city manager at 10:30 a.m. and at 11 a.m. a boil water notice was issued, a notice which had to be approved by the Nassau County Department of Health prior to issuing. Friday, June 21st, operators took another 15 samples, 12 throughout the distribution system, and 1 from the elevated water storage tank, 1 from the ground level water storage tank, and finished water leaving the water treatment plant. On June 22nd, the lab reported that the results of those samples were all negative. Negative is good, positive is bad. Saturday, June 22nd, operators took another 15 samples, 12 throughout the distribution system, 1 from the elevated storage tank, 1 from the ground level water storage tank, and the finished water leaving the water treatment plant. On June 23rd, the lab reported the results of those samples all were negative. On Sunday, June 23rd, operators took another 15 samples, 12 throughout the distribution system and 1 from the elevated water storage tank, ground level storage tank, and the finished water leaving the water treatment plant. On June 24th, the results of those were all reported to be negative. In addition to the city sampling on Friday, June 21st, the Nassau County Department of Health took 5 distribution samples. One of those samples taken from the Long Island Railroad Station in Bathurst tested positive for total colorforms, not E. coli. On Saturday, June 22nd, the Nassau County Department of Health took 5 more distribution samples, including a resample at the Long Island Railroad Station bathroom, which all tested negative. Based on the negative results of 55 samples and none showing E. coli, the boil water was lifted by the Nassau County Department of Health on Monday, June 24th. On June 24th, 2019, engineers from the New York State Department of Health and the Nassau County Department of Health spent the day with our chief plant operator and our operators going through the E. coli bin and assessing and reviewing the entire operation. Other actions that were taken by the city. At the verbal direction of the Nassau County Department of Health, which was codified by a written directive received on June 22nd, the chlorine residual leaving the Park Place water treatment plant was raised to 2 parts per million, or 2 milligrams per liter, which are both the same thing, in order to maintain a 1.5 part per million chlorine residual in the distribution system. This would remain in effect until the next 4 weekly rounds of routine sampling took place. And just so everybody understands what a milligram per liter or a part per million is, it's basically 8.3 pounds of chlorine in 1 million gallons of water. Other actions taken, the distribution system was flushed on Friday, June 21st, and Saturday, June 22nd, to ensure good chlorine residual throughout the system. Generally, we do 2 flushings of the system in the fall and in the spring for 2 weeks at nighttime to remove sediments and percolation from old online cast behind water mains. They're done at night so that we don't just, send out discolored water to the homeowners. Unfortunately, this had to be done during the day, so some people on those days may have experienced discolored water. On June 25th, July 2nd, July 9th, and July 16th, 10 distribution samples were taken, and the results of all 40 samples were negative. On July 19, 2019, the chief plant operator and I submitted our level 2 assessment to the Nassau County Department of Health as directed in the June 22nd written directive. On July 19th, we received a report also from the state and county assessment from their visit on June 24th. Based on that report, the Nassau County Department of Health gave us a go-ahead on Monday, July 22nd, below the chlorine residual, leaving the plant at 1.5 milligrams per liter. As soon as the county finishes reviewing our assessment, we should get clearance to reduce the chlorine residual back to normal operating levels. By the way, the limit on chlorine in the system that is allowed is 4 milligrams per liter or 4 parts per million. We were putting it out to the plant, the highest reading we had was 2.1 milligrams per liter during that whole period. My evaluation is I would look to finalizing the incident. It's not unusual for water systems to experience a positive microbiological sample with cause often undetermined. There are many reasons the sample could have tested positive. The sample tap may have been contaminated, the sample bottle may have been contaminated or compromised. Contamination within the residence of the building which the sample was taken, a cross connection within the building that allowed the clean water to mix with wastewater. There was only 1 sample that tested positive for E. coli and 3 samples that tested positive for total colorform. This indicates to me this is not a system-wide issue, as all the samples that day, June 18th, were negative for total colorform. The residents where the only sample tested positive for E. coli had a water filter. Sometimes water filters are a bed for bacteria. Negative samples from wells and treatment plant indicate that this was not from the supply source but caused by the operation of the treatment plant. The cities follow all Nassau County Department of Health regulations, directives, and procedures required to safeguard the public in a timely manner. Our Commissioner of Building Department also acts as our emergency manager. Within 1 hour after the boil notice order, had notified South Nassau Community Hospital of possible E. coli incident. We were informed at that time that they had already been notified by the county legislature. Increasing the supply of chlorine residual to 2 milligrams per liter in the flushing system cause the location of the positive sample is appropriate and right action to safeguard the public health, even though it might have caused some discolored water complaints. Where are we today? The State and County Health Department report received on July 19th made 12 recommendations. This is the status of those recommendations at this time. 1, Recommendation 1, the city should continue to keep fluorine residual at 1.5 parts per million residual at entry point until the level 2 assessment and issue report has been reviewed by Nassau County Health Department. The city's level 2 assessment to the Health Department was submitted after consultation with Nassau County Department of Health. The fluorine residual leaving plan was lowered to 1.5 milligrams per liter from the present 2.0 milligrams per liter. Recommendation 2, operators should verify that the standpipe is completely empty. We have taken our standpipe out of service due to a leak on the tower. If there is standing water below the drain, the standpipe should be pumped out. Preferably the line between the standpipe and the distribution system should be severed to eliminate any potential cross connection. The system operators have verified that the standpipe is empty. Design is underway to completely remove the standpipe in the 2019-2020 budget year. We will review how best to disconnect the tank. Recommendation 3, operators should collect pH and conductivity measurements along with fluorine residual levels with their routine polyform compliance samples to provide another means of identifying any changes in distribution system water quality. Our operators already take fluorine residuals and pHs when sampling. The portable conductivity meter is already on order. This meter will also test for suspended solids. The city should consider including heterotropic plate counts analysis at target locations in the distribution system with total coliform analysis using a membrane filter method to quantify the number of coliform colonies. The city is going to need further evaluation and clarification from the state on this in the county. Recommendation 5, all gauges within the water treatment plant that no longer function should be replaced. Some of our pressure gauges on our sand filters do not work. These gauges let us know when the pressure loss in the filter requires the filter to be backwashed. Groundwater makeup and ion levels are soaking systems that operators use runtimes instead to determine backwash cycle. However, the gauges will be replaced. Recommendation number 6, a third party should conduct a sanitary survey and comprehensive level 2 assessment of the system and develop recommendations. The sanitary survey should commence by August 1st, 2019. We recommend that Nassau County Health Department incorporate corrective actions into an enforceable compliance timetable. We encourage you to work closely with the Nassau County Health Department to ensure the scope of this assessment meets requirements. The city has secured H2M performing an independent level 2 assessment in addition to the one completed in-house. Paul Pantoro to my right is a senior water resource engineer at H2M, will be the project manager. Prior to joining H2M, Paul was the chief of the Office of Water Resources of the Suffolk County Health Department. Paul has written numerous papers and related to coliform bacteria, related to distribution system quality. So I think we picked the right person. 7, the water sampling station located on Grand Boulevard does not comply with current Nassau County Department of Health water sampling station guidelines and requirements and should be replaced. Components of the water sampling station were found damaged and leaking. It is also requested that the station be relocated away from trees and vegetation that may enter the water sampling during collection on a rainy or windy day. A new sampling station has been ordered and will be installed with an overhead shelter. The chief plant operator has already started plans for redoing all of our sampling stations. We have 5 outdoor sampling stations and then we use 5 building locations for 10 samples each week. Recommendation 8, the city should evaluate repeat sampling locations upstream and downstream of approved distribution system sampling spots. The 2 repeat samples collected on June 19, 2009 were from 2 residential outdoor hose bits suspected of producing results that are not representative of water in the distribution system. One hose bit was near ground level and the other was a short spout so close to the house wall that adequate flaming of the hose bit prior to sample collection is difficult. Both residents reportedly have home filtration systems. Modifications to sampling locations should be approved by Nassau County Health Department. We will be evaluating potential locations for repeat sample, assuring there are no internal issues which could impact the validity of the sample, with the understanding that we need to do repeat samples in these locations that are readily accessible and representative of the distribution system. Recommendation number 9, the city should conduct a survey of all routine sample locations to ensure that they were approved by Nassau County Health Department. The current construction standards are listed on the approved sampling site plan and map. The chief plant operator has finished the survey and will be submitting an update to the Nassau County Department of Health for approval. Recommendation 10, the city should provide periodic refresher training to staff regarding proper sample collection techniques, sample preservation, and transport. All our water plant operators are licensed through the state. and all go for continuing education in order to maintain their water plant operator's license. Each year, a class is given on sampling. Based on this recommendation, however, the city will request that base labs come in and give an in-house class just to our operators. Recommendation number 11, the city should evaluate the adequacy of its cross connection control programs to barriers to backside and contaminants into the distribution system. Recommendations regarding the cross connection control plan are included in our 2019 sanitary survey letter prepared by Nassau County Health Department. The city uses an outside vendor to follow up on testing the devices. These are backflow prevention devices that prevent, we have over 8,000 connections to the water system for homes, businesses, and commercial establishments. These devices prevent backflow into the system. While there's been a significant improvement in device testing compliance, the program on evaluating hazards in commercial establishments does need improvement. I'm recommending additional training with our meter reader on evaluating degrees of hazard and follow-up on device compliance. Recommendation 12, the city of Long Beach should further evaluate the Park Place treatment plant system as part of a sanitary survey to determine if the open basins are potential source of coliform and E. coli contamination. On December 4, 2018, the City Council authorized DPW to engage H2M engineers to develop a plan covering the open air basins. We have already received a preliminary report and I've asked H2M to make an application to the state for Water Infrastructure Improvement Act grant that covers some of these costs. This time we're going to turn it over to Brad Hutton to speak about E. coli contamination and microbiological issues.
Thanks, John. Good evening, everyone. As John said, my name is Brad Hutton, and I serve as the Deputy Commissioner for Public Health with the New York State Health Department. I've been in the department for 25 years. My background is in communicable disease epidemiology, and one of the things I really love about my job is that subject matter experts in each of our different program areas are national experts. When it comes to water supply protections, they're national experts among their peers, and the same with respect to communicable disease control. Tonight, I'd like to give you some information on this series of activities that are undertaken at the state and local level to investigate cases of E. coli from a communicable disease perspective, to hopefully give you some more information about all that we do to protect you, and then also some additional information from a broader perspective on the system of controls that we have in place for public water to also protect you against, in this case, microbial contamination. And then, of course, look forward to any questions that you have and provide you with some information. You have a beautiful community. I'm glad to be down here and sorry that it's under these circumstances, but again, happy to provide hopefully some answers to many of your very good questions. I want to thank Senator Kaminsky, Assemblywoman Miller, other city and county officials for setting this forum up and for providing support and really advocating on your behalf right when this was hitting and through the current day. First, I want to give you a little bit of background on E. coli, because most people don't realize it's all around us. It's common in the environment. It's in your intestines. You may not know it, some of you might, but we have microbes that live in us and on top of us all the time. And there's this wonderful symbiotic relationship that we have with bacteria that sort of maintain a nice, healthy, steady state. And so there are many strains of E. coli that are not harmful to humans. And in fact, can actually be helpful to protect you and part of the line of defense. However, there are strains, it's a large family of bacteria that are more likely to cause human disease, and those are the ones that we're concerned about. Some of them are called Shiga toxin emitting. That happens to be a toxin that is partly part of the disease process that makes us sick, and it creates a lot of the symptoms that we have. We focus a lot of our attention on Shiga toxin emitting E. coli. And those are all, every single one of them is reportable to the state health department. When labs do tests that are ordered by your doctors because you have diarrheal illness, if the lab finds that it's an instance of E. coli and it's a Shiga toxin emitting E. coli, it gets reported to us within a day electronically, and then it gets parsed out to the appropriate county health department for investigation depending on where you reside. That triggers a series of activities that our communicable disease detectives undertake, including interviewing the person who had that disease. You should know that we have hundreds of cases of STEC, we call it, Shiga toxin emitting E. coli, hundreds of cases statewide each year. It is unfortunately one of the more common bacterial causes of human disease. Every single one of those gets an investigation, and there's a questionnaire that Dr. Eisenstein here in Nassau County staff call up that case or another loved one or caregiver and ask them a series of questions to try and get at the bottom of what a potential source is. You should know that fortunately now in the 21st century, the leading cause of E. coli infection is foodborne disease. That's in large part due to some controls that we put in place over the last century here in water disinfection. So still, every single one of those cases are investigated. We ask individuals where they've been, what restaurants they've eaten at, what kind of foods. Our lab, we have fortunately one of the best state public health labs in the nation. They're able to do some really fancy molecular testing. You might think of it as a fingerprint of the bacteria. Every single one of those Shiga toxin E. coli's, we ask the provider who diagnosed the case to send the remaining sample. It comes up to our lab, they do some testing, it takes about a week, and ultimately we get a molecular fingerprint for every single one of those cases. We then submit it to a national data bank because all other states have their samples tested as well, and we compare those fingerprints. And oftentimes, we're able to identify that it matches another case, sometimes in another state, sometimes in another county. And that's really important information because when we identify that it's part of a cluster, we're able to compare people who are infected as part of that cluster to see what are their exposures that were in common. And oftentimes, when you see a food recall in the United States, it's as a result of that kind of molecular typing that identifies commonalities between people who are in different parts of the country. And ultimately, the federal government, FDA, sometimes the state government implements a food recall. Food produce, meats are definitely common sources of E. coli infection. And that's a really amazing development here in the last 10 years of my career. That molecular testing has allowed us to piece together cases of E. coli that previously we wouldn't have known were related. And so as a result of that, now today, the vast majority of E. coli STEC cases are foodborne related. Okay, so moving on, transitioning to talking about water protections. So what I learned in public health school, and you should all know, is that one of the greatest public health accomplishments of the 20th century was the formation of public water systems and the use of chlorine to disinfect and protect us against microbial infection. It maybe single-handedly was responsible for improvements of longevity that allows us to live to the ages that we live. In the early 1900s, late 1800s, there were cholera outbreaks, dysentery, lots of waterborne and sanitary conditions that resulted in people getting disease and dying, unfortunately, way too young. So it's a great accomplishment to public health that we now have public water systems that largely add chlorine, a chemical, to your water to disinfect and protect you against bacteria that's present. Remember, that bacteria is out there all over the environment, it's in us. We want to try and disinfect it to a level that it's not a concern in your water. So in my career, we really have not had the waterborne disease outbreaks that were in previous generations. Despite that, we have a series of pretty aggressive protections to make sure that we don't have an outbreak. And so John was describing to you some of the requirements that actually come to us from the federal government. We pass on, they're in our state regulatory code as well, that dictate those water systems. There's 3,000 that serve communities across the state. The number of samples that they have to collect in a given month to make absolute sure that there's no microbial contamination in the water system. And so here in Long Beach, it happens that they have to collect 40 per month. As John said, they have a plan that has to get approved by Nassau County, our really close partners in this endeavor, and by us. to make sure that their sampling plan is representative of the community. We wouldn't want them sampling all from one location. We want to make sure that it represents different parts of the water system. They collect 10 samples per month, and that happens, and you might not ever know about it until in June, when one of those 10 samples in a given week came back, as John said, as total coliform positive. So I want to say a little bit about that lab technology. John's staff collect the water sample. When they do that, they do their best not to introduce bacterial contamination when they collect the sample. The lab technology nowadays is amazing. It can detect, first of all, it doesn't detect the actual bacteria. It detects the presence of an enzyme that's metabolized by that bacteria. And it's so sensitive, it's so good nowadays that it can detect that enzyme's presence, and it changes color, so the lab has a way of detecting its presence. It can detect the presence of even a single unit of bacteria, whether it's total coliform or E. coli, so it's incredibly sensitive. And because it's so sensitive, we have to be absolutely sure we don't introduce contamination when we're collecting those samples, or we choose samples that aren't potentially contaminated near the local site. Despite the potential for contamination, John and the city of Long Beach, even just having a single total coliform hit or positive finding, it triggers a series of other requirements, as John was describing. They have to go out and do repeat samples. They did on the next day, both the same location where there was that positive total coliform hit, and something upstream immediately and something downstream, so we can help determine whether or not there's the potential for a system-wide microbial concern, and also if we know what part of the distribution it might be coming from. John's staff did that. The location that had the initial positive came back negative the next day. However, those two locations where there were repeat samples came back positive. And as John was describing, those are sites that they don't normally use. It was only sites that they were triggered as a result of this enhanced monitoring. They were private residences. They had bibs. If you picture your hose bib at home, they were close to the ground. John and his staff go through a lot of work to wear gloves, to flame the bib so that it eliminates the possibility that there's any contamination. They run the water for a period of time. I purchased a home that has a private well in the last year, and I really gained an appreciation for how important this is when you're collecting a sample, because there's such great prospect for bacteria to be present all over in your water system, especially at the site where we have a lot of hand contact, right? So those samples came back positive automatically as a result of that. There's no discretion. This was not us getting in a room and deciding, do we do a boil water order? It's required. We have to do a boil water order. And that's because the system that we have in place to protect you all against waterborne disease outbreaks is incredibly precautionary. We don't want to take any chance. At that point, we don't want to wait a day and collect additional samples and see whether or not there's any potential risk. It's a boil water order. So everyone kicked into action. All of your elected officials helped to secure use of bottled water. We did some additional activities here to do a more comprehensive assessment to try and figure out, are there some obvious causes of those bacterial hits? I'll tell you, we spend a lot of time with water systems across the state. You're not unique. Many water systems have failing infrastructure because we're in the Northeast and we have older municipalities that implemented those public water systems in the early 1900s and still have a lot of that infrastructure. We have a lot of experience with challenged water systems that have microbial contamination. One of the things that comforted us very early on, John was talking about the chlorine residuals. He detects constantly from water samples coming out of the plant, what are those chlorine levels? And then went to distal locations throughout the city and said, what are the chlorine levels at those distal locations? To see what's happening. In a system where we have challenges with microbial contamination, the levels of chlorine are lower in the distal points that are coming out of the plant because the microbes are demanding that chlorine. We see lower levels. We did not see that here. There was no chlorine demand. Levels were pretty consistent throughout the distribution system. So again, it didn't look to us like there was any risk for system-wide microbial contamination. However, the way the rule works, again, to be precautionary, we have to have 2 consecutive days of negative testing, and we did county did sampling, the city did additional sampling. We needed to have 2 days before we wanted to take any chance and have you continue resuming use of the water. We offered a lot of recommendations that John went through. One of the ones immediately that I know is creating concern in the community is we asked him to increase the chlorine levels. Again, to be safe, let's ramp up the chlorine. The staff spent a lot of time flushing it through the system. If we're going to increase the chlorine, we want to make sure that higher chlorine level gets all throughout the distribution system, so we can disinfect any of those pipes. How many miles of pipes, John? 55 miles of pipes. We need to make sure have an exposure, a contact time to that higher dose of chlorine to make sure that if there is bacterial contamination out there, that chlorine is going to knock it down. That does unfortunately create taste and odor concerns, especially if you're used to a lower level of chlorine. As John mentioned, there are some regulatory levels that have been established at the federal levels for chlorine, even though it's been doubled here in Long Beach temporarily, it is still well below, half as low as the levels that EPA has set that could potentially begin to cause health effects long-term, not acute. However, that definitely results in some inconvenience, and I know that that's part of the complaints you're going to have questions and concerns about here tonight. Fortunately, as John shared, they have now, at Nassau County's advice and our support, lowered the levels as recently as Monday back to 1.5. And if we continue to see those weekly samples come back negative, we'll continue to recommend lowering it. I do want to talk a little bit about the work that we've done in the community to investigate cases of E. coli. Because another thing that we do when we have a boil water order is something called active surveillance. We don't want to just wait for labs to report their cases of E. coli infection to us. We want to go actively out and find them, contact hospitals, contact healthcare centers, say, hey, if you have any E. coli, we want to be really sure we know about all the cases. We did that. We investigated the cases. We did have one case locally where we recently concluded the investigation, and it was a definitive link to a foodborne source. Remember, as I mentioned earlier on, we have amazing molecular testing that's done at our Wadsworth Center that enables us to compare samples to all those samples that are found nationally. It was a match to patients in other parts of the country that are already subject to a food recall. It's a definitive match, and what that means also is it's definitively not associated with anything to do with the water system. We've gone out and investigated all the potential E. coli cases, and we're here to tell you today that you really are not at any risk right now from microbial contamination due to the water, and you probably never were. However, we have a system in place that we don't want to take any chances. We want to have absolute protections in place to make sure that you don't have any risk. I think I'll pause there. Did you forget anything we should cover? And turn it over for questions. Go ahead, Larry. Yeah, go ahead. Dr. Isaacson.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Larry Eisenstein. I am your health commissioner. I've been at the Department of Health for about a decade. I want to thank the community for your response and your interactions with the health department with questions. I think Commissioner Hutton just gave a really thorough recap of what happened here. I just want to share with you a little bit about what we did in the health department and different from what was said. So one of the questions that I was asked right after this happened was it difficult for you to sign the boil water order? Was it a tough judgment call? And I think it's important that we reiterate that the actions that the health department took are protective, and it was not a judgment call. It was all prescribed under code. The code required us to do a boiling water alert, and I'm extremely appreciative that when that's the case, we don't want our residents drinking the water. And so I immediately called my boss, County Executive Curran, who did an amazing job helping us organize a press conference. In a matter of minutes, a press conference happened, and I think we heard that the lab reported it at 9:30, and by 11 o'clock in the morning, with the help of the press, we were getting the message out to this community to take precautions and not drink the water temporarily. And the goal was certainly not to incite fear, but the press was a wonderful partner in helping us get the message out, the education out to our residents, so we have to thank them. Our staff worked around the clock. We set up a call center, and the first evening we took over 500 calls. We kept the call center open from residents. Most of the residents were local residents, some were from other parts of the county and even the state asking if this involved them. So there's a lot of work that goes into this. Water protection is one of the key components of a good public health system, and clean water really is historically one of the, if not the main factor that has added longevity to people's lives. And so much work goes into it, so I'm very appreciative of all that's done. My director of environmental health our director for all of us of environmental health at the Nassau County Department of Health, Don Irwin, came from the Water Bureau. He's the director of water protection for many years. So he has the expertise, our staff has the expertise in this. A lot went well. The disease investigation, whenever a reportable disease comes in, our disease investigators evaluate it, try and find the source. There's a series of questions that are asked that help us try and identify the source. And the purpose of the health department, when it gets down to it, with all the different offices that the health department has, our purpose is that our residents don't get sick. Period. That's why the health department exists. And so all of the actions that we take when there's a potential risk is to try and ensure that nobody gets sick. The actions that we take when somebody is sick is to try and make sure that nobody else around that person gets sick. And so the efforts that happen in this, thorough questioning, thorough evaluation is done. The law requires when there's approximately 80 or so reportable diseases, which by law have to be reported to the health department. The health department then, our disease investigators then ask the questions as was discussed before. If it's around food, they ask food questions. Where did you eat? What did you eat? Did anybody else in your household eat the same thing? It's a puzzle. It's a puzzle to try and solve the source of illness. If it's a different kind, if it's a respiratory illness, what room were you in? Were you on an airplane? Did you travel? So our disease investigators are excellent at trying to pinpoint the source, and our goal is to eliminate the source of transmission of disease. And the code helps us be proactive and protective. I think it's a very important point to reiterate that all of us have some E. coli living in us. There are many strains of E. coli that are not all harmful. Some of them are helpful. Some of them, however, can be very dangerous. Some of them can be deadly and are deadly. And so the actions that we take are to protect you, to keep everybody safe. When we see the possibility of our residents getting sick, it pushes us to take the action. That's why we're here. And so that's what happened in this case. I have been asked, we heard that there are hundreds of confirmed cases of E. coli in New York State every year. I assume somebody's gonna ask if there are cases in Nassau, so I'm just gonna come out and share with you. We do monitor all the cases of reportable E. coli. Typically, the E. coli that emit this Shiga toxin, which is a chemical that causes disease. And we've had about 50 cases in Nassau County, countywide this year. That is not unusual. That is more or less typical for a year. Of those 50, 27 of them are confirmed, which means the analogy I use is if it flies and it quacks, you think it's a duck, and then you get a blood test that shows it's a duck, that's confirmed. We have about 25 or so, 24 that are probable, and that means it flies and it quacks and it swims, but we don't have a blood test to confirm it's a duck, but it's most likely a duck. So when you combine probable and confirmed cases, Nassau County has had 5 cases in the whole year, and not relating to water at all. Just some of them are from various causes. Some we know the source, a food source or another source. Some will never know the source. We've had, of the 50 cases, 2 confirmed cases in the entire year of Long Beach residents and 1 probable case in Long Beach residents. So the total of E. coli cases in Nassau County this year, to date, or to this week at least, is 3 cases of Long Beach residents. Out of 50 in the county, that is pretty much consistent with the percentage of Long Beach residents out of the entire population of the county. And this is absolutely something we see every year. So from a disease epidemiology perspective, as E. coli goes, this has been a typical year, and we've not seen anything unusual. And I share this with you to provide comfort that we're not seeing anything unusual as a result of this.
One is too many. One is too many. Every year, you have 2 confirmed cases.
I'm sorry, we will have time for speakers and questions and answers, but for now, we need to keep moving that on.
So we investigate many thousands of reportable diseases each year and do everything we can to make sure transmission doesn't happen. So that's the summary of what's gone on. We want you to know the numbers and understand the risk and the reality of it. Certainly, if you have water-specific questions, expertise at this table, we'll be happy to answer. And I want to leave plenty of time for questions, so Don, do you want to, or? Okay, so John, back.
Okay, we can start with questions.
Yeah, call for speaker. So I'll just remind the speakers to limit to 3 minutes. I will put my hand up when you have 15 seconds left, just so you can get an idea of when to wrap it up. So our first speaker is Tim Cramer.
Hi. Hi, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out to Mortgage tonight to hopefully answer some questions, and I also want to thank our elected officials for putting this forum together. Since the E. coli breakup, in my mind, the E. coli issue was just another chapter in the book, okay? Our water problems and issues, in my mind, have been going on for decades, okay? There are times in my own home that water comes out of our tap about the color of the chair you're sitting in, okay? It's that dark. Not always, this doesn't happen always, but there are times, and along with that comes the odor and the bad tasting water as well. And this is not specific to my home. This is not specific to any one area of Long Beach. Since social media has come about, people have been posting, their bad water quality. And, in my mind, this is a public health crisis, and this will not get corrected until we define it as such. And I have some questions, and hopefully John will be able to answer for me. What is the material that our fresh water pipes are made of?
Okay, well, we have 55 miles of water main, and a lot of those mains originally put in were made out of online cast iron. In other words, they were open cast iron.
Okay, so,
Let me answer the question, please.
go ahead.
Since 1986, we have replaced over 10.25 miles of that pipe with upper-line cement line pipe to prevent tuberculation and deposits on the walls of the pipe. That 10 miles, not counting services and hydrants, cost over $7 million. So over that period of time. We treat when water is pumped up out of the wells, it's very acidic. We have very low pHs. We're taking water from 1,300 feet deep in the White Aquifer. So it's very acidic. So we treat that water with lime to raise the pH. And what we do is we treat the water to a point where the Langmuir index is just positive, so that we deposit on the water main either calcium, things of that nature, or suspended solids, so that we don't corrode the pipes and eliminate them. As we do any work now, and we do 2 major road projects a year, where we replace the sewer lines, the sewer mains, we replace the water main also with upper line pipe. We have 2 more projects scheduled for this year. In addition, many of the services that hook up to the homes are made from galvanized pipe. Galvanized pipe also tuberculates. We replace those services with copper services now.
Right.
So, there's 45 miles more of main.
So 10 of the 55 have been replaced with lined,
Line Smith, and the other thing is, remember, when the original system was built, probably the water demands were less, so you have smaller pipes, you have some 6-inch pipe, which means the velocities are quicker in the pipe, and they will stir up sediment when there's a street sweeper grabs a, hydrant or something like that.
Right.
So that will disturb the sediment. That's why we do flushing in October and flushing in May.
So, do we know the age of the other 45 miles of pipe, roughly?
We roughly know the age of the areas of pipes, yes, based on when
Specific block to block?
Yeah, based on when the areas were developed.
And roughly how old are those, would you say, roughly?
Well,
I'll take a broad stroke.
some of the pipes could be as old as 75, 80 years old.
Okay, that's certainly a concern. So is there, so the plan in place is as the roads need to be replaced, we replace the pipes?
As we do complete road projects, we make sure we replace the water mains, the water services, and the hydrants.
So I just want to sum up, I think I'm almost finished here. So I think it's an overall infrastructure issue. I believe that. Water tower, pumping station, piping in the ground, everything's got to be scrutinized, everything's got to be looked at very closely. And, having water come out of your tap, that's that color of a chair, okay? None of you guys on this panel will ever convince me that that's so. Okay, it needs to be replaced.
I would make one request about this public water. We don't get as many calls in the office about this public water as you think, okay? Generally, when we do it, yes, it's very.
I've been at this cover water for 20 years, I've never called once.
Right, so what I'd like to ask people is posting it on social media, please call a public works office so we can start tracking where the issues are. That helps us do a better job of planning each year when we're gonna replace roads and where our most problems are.
That's good advice.
The number for anybody that has that issue, the number for public works is 516-431-1011. You can look it up on the website.
Our next speaker is Liz Treston.
I appreciate you standing, thank you, Brooke. Actually, my question is for you regarding, does the hospital call you? Are they actually required to call you regarding an E. coli breakout? And again, let me preface, because of the stories on social media, and I agree with John that it would be one of the recommendations to add to the menu is to have a advisory committee that includes the residents to monitor social media so that we can get to you to let you know that these homes do have groundwater and they're still posting it as we are having this meeting continually. So there is an issue, whether people are calling, I don't think they are, because they don't know that that's what they're supposed to do. So back to the medical thing. So regarding the hospital is supposed to call you?
So, in the old days, they might have picked up the phone and called, and the requirement on the books might be for them to do that kind of reporting. Nowadays, though, it's all electronic. When a lab has a positive report, they put it in their electronic system, and then each night it gets uploaded to a computer system that we maintain, and that parses it out. So we learned within 24 to 48 hours every case of E. coli. Some diseases prompt us to get called in the middle of the night. So we really get real-time reports. However, as I mentioned here, we didn't wait for those lab tests to get reported to us. We actively called out, working with local officials, called all the healthcare providers in the area and said, hey, you got any E. coli that you haven't reported yet? What are you seeing? Are you seeing symptoms that might be consistent with it? Because we didn't want to rely on that upload, but it happens pretty much near real time nowadays.
I appreciate that. And again, I appreciate the three of you standing, thank you.
Next speaker is Phyllis Hoffman.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, for everything. I still don't really understand why we have groundwater. I did call many years ago to find out why is my water brown. I called your office. I was told we don't have groundwater, it's not the city's problem, ask your building manager. Every time I was saying, it's saying. So I don't understand why it's water brown, and what are the health implications of this groundwater? Because my daughter takes a bath in it, I'm cooking, I'm trying to use my Brita filter, but that's turning brown, my bathtub turned brown. Why is it this groundwater?
Okay, often in a large apartment building, it is an internal problem, but if you have an issue with discolored water when it happens, if you can give us a call, we will
I
send,
did,
well, you said many years ago, I've been here 2.5 years. We send somebody out to the building to do an investigation. Often it can be because of the boiler in the building, sometimes they run the temperatures too high in the boiler, and that will set, disrupt the chemical makeup of the water, which will allow any iron or sediment to settle out of the water. And then when you get a large flow, it disturbs that boiler, or disturbs, especially in places like bathtubs. If you turn on hot water quick, you can stir up the hot water tank, things of that nature. So if you get another discolored water, if you get discolored water again, call our office, and we'll send somebody to do a complete investigation in the building, to find out if it's coming from the building or the system, and we will determine what the issue is and correct it.
okay, I will, but, it's periodic, it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off.
As I explained, water flows through the pipes at a certain velocity, which keeps things kind of settled. When somebody opens a hydrant for a street sweeper, somebody opens a hydrant for a sewer truck, somebody opens a hydrant for a fire or a fire call, that reverses the flow, it increases the flow, the velocity increases, and that can stir up any sediment in May. Again, as I said earlier, that's why in May for 2 weeks and in November for 2 weeks, we flush the system to remove any of those sediments and try to reduce the number of problems. It'd be a very difficult task for us to replace 45 miles of main and galvanized services all in, a time where we do them as our budget allows.
But is this groundwater safe to
It's,
drink, to
it's,
bathe in?
it's not aesthetically nice to drink, but there's nothing dangerous in it, it's just iron and sediment.
You drinking the groundwater.
So I'd like to address that a little bit. Don Irwin from the Health Department, Environmental Health Director. Generally, that groundwater contains iron, whether it's coming from inside the main or from the well. And it can be intermittent. It will also occur more frequently in the hot water tap. As John explained, the hot water will break down some of the chemical makeup that keeps that iron in suspension, and then it will come out. And so sometimes your hot water heaters need to be flushed out, but it's iron and it's not a health risk to you, but it's not pleasant. You certainly don't want to bathe in it or wash your clothes in it, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Now, I'm confident that if we call John and his people, they will come out and assess the situation. If at any time you're calling the city and you feel like you're not getting an adequate response to that kind of an issue, you can always call the health department, and we will take action and coordinate with the city to try to address your concern.
What's that number? Okay.
That number, to report that kind of water issue, the number is 227-9692.
Thank you.
And we'll post that on our website for you.
Let me add one other thing. For any of you that have a home filter, filter inside your home, whether it's under the sink or a home, any kind of filter, you have to be certain that you follow the manufacturer's directions in terms of maintaining it, replacing it, because whether it's iron or other types of things that would be more harmful, once it's saturated, it could dose those contaminants back into your water. So if you have a filter, please maintain it properly.
And also, don't forget today too, many of your refrigerators that have ice dispensers have their own internal filter. You should also check those and replace them periodically.
Alexis Tate?
Some of you have spoken to Mr. Irwin, I know you and I have spoken. And just so before you all speak and make the announcement, I am the parent of the child who tested positive to E. coli. I'm also the parent that was informed that it was not linked to the water and I want to state publicly that when you took your intakes on myself and my child, I shared with you that I ate a bison burger. I also shared with the Department of Health that my daughter that evening was not feeling well. that I ordered her chicken nuggets and she did not eat rice. Somehow she was linked to the foodborne outbreak, and I'm gonna give you that. That's not even my concern. So I have so many concerns, 3 minutes won't even really cover it, so I'm just gonna try and hit the main points. You said that there was active surveillance then. So I self-reported as soon as the hospital called me at 8 a.m. during the boil water notice. I, at 9 a.m., called that number, they just gave us. And I self-reported and said my daughter was ill. I thought it was a public health crisis. I was concerned for the residents of my city that we had a confirmed positive E. coli during a boil water notice. When you say you took all actions and did active surveillance, I'd like you to explain to me what protocols were in place as soon as you received my call. What does that look like?
I'll try and describe active surveillance as a case, but I didn't receive your call, so I don't know if I can chronologically answer that.
You should be able to really
I think
rattle
what
this
that-
off if it's a protocol that should be known by each and every one of you as experts. I would expect it to like, boom, this is the protocol. So go ahead, you have the phone. I'm anxious to hear.
Yep, so those are phone calls that are made to all the different healthcare providers in the area, hospitals and others that could potentially diagnose a case of E. coli, labs that are in the area to see whether or not they have cases, to make sure that there aren't reports of E. coli out there that haven't been received by us in the county health department. That's what that protocol is that I mentioned.
So what I'm more looking for is when a resident says there's a positive and there's E. coli, and we're under boil water, do you deploy people to be here to monitor the Facebook chatter, to monitor your phones, to have testing sites in place where sick residents, where there were many. And if you look on any Facebook page, which I believe I even shared with you guys, that if you looked, it was there. I didn't hear of anything happening. I know that residents were going to local area hospitals and being turned away. They were being told they were not testing. They were being told that in the absence of testing, if you suspected you had an E. coli infection, they would give you Cipro. As an epidemiologist, I'm sure you know that that's actually opposite of protocol and can kill people. My daughter was not treated with any medication because sugar toxin producing E. coli can then kill you if you take antibiotics. It can produce side effects, and you know that very well. So the fact that hospitals in the area were not testing, offering Cipro, that the city MD ran out of tests, why wasn't the Department of Health here, have people on the ground giving those tests out for free? At that point, this was June 23rd. You did not know where the E. coli came from. All you knew was there was a concerned parent of a very, very sick child who was almost dying, having active flooding diarrhea, who already is immune suppressed. And I begged you for your help, and I begged you to release this information to the public. And I took it upon myself, and residents here know, I went on every Facebook page and gave as much transparency as I could possibly provide to protect people. Where were you? I know my time is up. This is the point. Where were you?
We had folks here on the ground within a day. As I described to you, we aggressively investigate every single case of E. coli.
What was the
Largely
protocol?
that results in us determining foodborne causes of E. coli. We were working aggressively to implement protective measures in the public water system, including the boil water order. Really sorry that your daughter had that infection. I'm a father of 4 daughters myself, and I would be just as motivated as you to find the cause. I'm just here to tell you today that it's definitively not the water system.
That's not what I'm trying to tell you. What I'm telling you is.
Ms. Pace, your time has expired. Please wrap it up in a sentence.
Yes, I have one last question. I have one last question. And this one's really important. And Mr. Urban, I asked you this when you called me that morning prior to 9 a.m. and you told me it was not confirmed, that it was not a match. What strain of E. coli was in the water? Because I'm aware that Wadsworth Lab was shipped a sample of the water. What strain was in the water? Can we guarantee that it was not linked to any person? And can we guarantee it wouldn't have made people sick? Can you answer that?
Yeah, I can answer that. So as I explained earlier, the positive test was actually for the presence of an enzyme which can indicate that E. coli was present. Then we took a remaining sample from that water sample that the city had and attempted to grow that bacteria in culture on plates to make sure it's truly bacteria, and we were unsuccessful growing that bacteria, which indicates that it potentially was either not present or present at such a low level, or potentially a strain that wasn't one that causes human disease. So again, as I explained earlier, the system does sampling to make sure that if there's any possibility of presence, including just a color code for enzyme, it didn't mean that there was actually bacteria that are present in the water.
And I'm just gonna point out the recommendations of the New York, the health department.
Ms. Case, your time has expired.
I get it.
We have a dozen other speakers. Please wrap it up in a sentence.
I'm pretty sure it doesn't have people are.
She's trying to get him.
So I just want to point out lastly that there was a recommendation made in the list that you rattled off, Mr. Miranda, and it says here that sampling collection techniques, sample preservation, and transport requires a refresher training. So I just want the public to understand that it is quite possible, reading it between the lines, that water sample was not protected, was not transported correctly, and therefore could not have been tested, and conveniently could then not be linked to any cases in the city.
Well,
All of this is relevant.
unfortunately, we'd be wrong about that because the
Okay.
sample went through proper protocol, proper chain of custody, and the sample did not go from the city to the state. The sample went from the New York State Certified Lab to the state.
Yep.
We had nothing to do with that transport from the sample from the lab to the state.
And are you
Actually, I
aware?
think just to add to that, the intent of that recommendation was to make sure that there wasn't any possibility that they were introducing bacterial contamination in the way they collected or transported it. Less concerning that they were actually missing the presence of bacteria.
I think since my time is up, like I said, I could stand up here and talk to you guys for an hour. I think that the bottom line is that the Department of Health, in my estimation, as a resident of Long Beach, as a resident of Nassau County, as a American citizen, you failed me on every level. I had to take it in my own hands to protect my family. I also think you failed the residents of the city of Long Beach. I want this to be a wake-up call. I'm not standing up here to shame you, because you already should hang your heads in shame a little bit. You know, you can do that quietly in the corner.
Thank you, Ms. Case. Your time has expired. Our lead item is our next speaker.
What I'm asking you to do is just do better next time.
The meeting's over 6 minutes.
Got it.
Ms. Case, please. We have 12
You live here, you should be worried. You should be letting me speak.
Our lead item is.
Mrs. Case, we'll be happy to talk to you after the meeting. I think we just want to be sure that others have an opportunity to ask questions. I'm not going anywhere.
Sounds great.
Good evening. I have a question that does not relate to E. coli, but it does to water. There has been a lot of information lately about contamination in the water on Long Island. Among the chemicals, I am no scientist, but among the chemicals that were listed were 1,4-dioxane, strontium, chromium-6, fluoride, and chromium. And I was wondering, since the reports I have seen have said that there are so many different water districts on Long Island, the implication was that not all of them are as infected by these as others may be. I don't know if any tests have been done, or I would like to know also whether there has been any comparison of Long Beach to other communities in Nassau County regarding the amounts of contamination.
Want me to start that? First of all, in Long Beach, we're very, very fortunate that all 8 of our supply wells draw water from the Lloyd Aquifer. The Lloyd Aquifer is the deepest aquifer and most pristine aquifer on Long Island. We have found no incidents of 1,4-dioxane. We've found no incidents of strontium. We have found no incidents of any of these other SOCs or VOCs. We're very fortunate. Our biggest concern with our supply is going to be saltwater intrusion. And the city is undertaking a study to determine if and when we might expect saltwater intrusion and what some of our options will be at that time. So we are very fortunate that the source water we have, other than iron, which exists naturally in the water and we remove at our treatment plant, really very lucky that we're not facing any of these new contaminants.
And so you're correct, there are 4 to 6 water systems, public water systems in Nassau County, and some do have their source water, their well water contaminated by chemicals, which is a legacy of the industry and commercial, leaking and dumping over decades, many decades. All of those water systems have to remove those chemicals before that water can be put into the distribution system and delivered to customers. So that water is tested before it's treated, it's tested after it's treated, and then it's also tested in the sound distribution system. That's done by both the water supplier and the health department. And that way we can be sure that that water is meeting all of the water quality standards and is safe to drink. Now, as John said, Long Beach is very fortunate because they don't face any of these challenges with the chemical contamination, and that's because the wells are the deepest aquifer of Lloyd Aquifer.
And just as a follow-up to that, if you're interested, on our website, each year we're required to do an annual water supply statement. And in that statement, we show all the testing that we do for various constituents and what the results are and how they meet standards. So that report is on our website under Public Works, under the water supply.
You can actually find that report and other information on water at longbeachny.gov/water.
Thank you very much. It's nice to hear something good about Long Beach's water.
Mary Rose Savage?
Hi, Mary Wallace, live in Long Beach. My question to you is, when you did this testing, and you mentioned clusters, was there a cluster? I mean, I'm hearing all these people that got sick and were refused testing, which I'm not so sure a hospital can turn you away and not test you, but you said that you get the reports electronically. Did you find a cluster in that area where it was contaminated?
So, as I stated before, E. coli which produce shigatoxin are reportable by law. The lab, or even if suspected, a doctor by law should report it to the health department. When the lab has it, it automatically comes to us electronically. So we also reached out and asked, are you seeing this? And the fact is, we, to this day, have not identified any cases of E. coli that tie epidemiologically to this water sample. 0, none. And that's a fact. And so we look for larger numbers of illness. So the state has monitoring systems where if all of a sudden there's a lot of respiratory infections in a certain area, for example, during flu season, that triggers us an alert, that kind of thing. We didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Now, there's always a certain level of people who are experiencing gastrointestinal illness, respiratory illness. Some gastrointestinal illnesses we do tend to see higher in the summer. Other things we see higher in the winter. And our disease investigators monitored very, very closely and did not find, and certainly found no cases of E. coli, and did not find any unusual patterns around this water sample.
All right, because there was also a virus going around, I know, for that, because my son had it. And I would just say, all these people that got tested had there been any sign of that, E. coli, that it would have been reported to you. So all these people that went to hospitals and were tested and went to doctors or urgent care, you would have known about that?
If they tested positive for a reportable disease, by law, we would have known about it.
Okay, thank you.
Jacqueline Weiss?
Hi, gentlemen.
Hello.
Jacqueline Weiss. I am a mother of one of the children who were diagnosed at the hospital the day after Long Beach announced that there was an E. coli outbreak and oil water. My first question is, during the reach out, did you reach out to them?
When we do active surveillance, we have 10 hospital partners, we reach out to all of them.
Is Winthrop one of them?
Yes.
Okay. After the 4 days that we spent in the hospital, I called the New York State Department of Health, and I spoke specifically to an individual in your department, sir, and she said that my daughter's E. coli positive test was not actually given to the State Department, or that it was not found. So my daughter isn't showing to be one of the individuals who was tested positive for the sugar toxin E. coli outbreak, which naturally would come from a place of ingestion. We live in the area. And it happened a few days, well, I'd say a week before Long Beach tested the water. My daughter was extremely sick. She was at the point of a 4-year-old being down 5 pounds, half of her sugar, half of her electrolytes, to the point that the doctors were extremely concerned. And so, hearing that the protocol is not correctly taken, either from the hospital or New York State, is frustrating, because then for me, I wonder how many other individuals or children out of the community, especially that there's been over 200 people stating that they were sick, including my husband, my other daughter, and myself. If that was missed, which is quite amazing, if I would say so, how many other times were missed as well during this exact situation? That's the frustration I have, because to spend 4 days in the hospital with my daughter, hearing horrific news that a 36-pound girl has lost 5 pounds, which on her is like us losing 30 to 40 pounds. Is this being taken as serious as you all are saying it is, yet serious cases are clearly being missed?
I hope you understand what that occurs. I know that that's a traumatic experience. I'll be happy to go back and get your information, and I can catch up with that staff member and see if I can figure out more about the circumstances in that case. And we can be back afterwards.
And we'd like to know too. We'd like to know as well, because the law is, if there is a E. coli case, that it is to be reported to the health department. And if that wasn't followed, we'd like to do what we can to make sure that doesn't happen again. So
And
we'll
it's
work with the
actually
state.
for us to get a sample and potentially try and determine what the cause is. If that's the hospital that diagnosed the case, they often retain clinical samples. So we're looking at it.
Thank you.
Christina Taylor?
Well, to start with, thank you for having me today and giving everybody the information. I just want to start with a little bit of my background and what my story is with the water. I moved here in 1999. We lived in 185 Park Avenue, and I noticed right away coming from Queens, where you drink right out of the tap, that the water smelled a little funny and it tasted a little funny. But being a lot younger and a little more carefree, I just put the water in a Brita, and that seemed to do the job for me. A couple of years later, we bought our house on Lincoln and Broadway, and I noticed that we still had the same problem, that the water is periodically brown, smells funny, tastes weird. But for that, we started adding house filters to our drinking taps, and filter added to the refrigerator as well. So in 2005 and 2010, I gave birth to my two boys. My second child, Chase, was a little more sensitive than my older child. And after Hurricane Sandy hit, after 2012, he was 18 months old. He kept getting sick over and over with ear infections, sinus infections, colds, respiratory infections, bronchial infections, bacterial infections. They kept giving him antibiotics over and over and over again, and no doctors could tell me what was wrong with him. Until one day, which was the final stroke, Chase, with my child's name is Chase, he came up with 104 fever, passed out in my arms, stopped breathing, and had a febrile seizure. Out of pure instinct, my husband hit him in the back and dislodged some phlegm from his throat, and we drove our limp toddler to South Nassau Hospital. Again, none of the doctors could tell us what the problem was, why my child kept getting sick. It was the scariest moment of my life, and I felt helpless because I couldn't do anything to get this child better. So, again, so after that, I took notice of the brown water in my bathtub one day, and I made the correlation that the brown water is also coming through our drinking taps, through our refrigerator, through our sinks. I'm cooking with it and bathing my kids with it. So against my husband's wishes, I bought a Poland Springs cooler, and it was only weeks before, oh wait, I'm missing one part. Everybody in my sick was sick continuously for weeks on end. We were so sick that I called the fire department, the Long Beach Fire Department, and asked them to come and check our house for carbon monoxide. It was unexplainable. So at that point, I took notice to the groundwater in my tub, made the correlation. Anyway, so miraculously, everybody has gotten better, and we really haven't been sick out of the norm. But I don't believe that citizens should be drinking out of plastic bottles for years on end. There are cancers that are related to it. Our problem is not, although I feel for the people who have E. coli, and it's definitely an alarm, our water here has been bad for years and years. We need new water tanks, we need new infrastructure, we need each of those pipes removed and replaced. I know that it's expensive, but we are one of the few communities that have a steady stream of revenue, and this needs to become a priority. And I'm very upset that this has not been a priority before this. Thank you for your time.
Glenn Spears?
Good evening, elected officials. Good evening to all my neighbors. It's wonderful to see you all come out for such an important issue. Experts, I do recognize everybody here as an expert, and everything you're saying here is wonderful tonight. We've been talking about this, as has been brought up by other speakers, going back to the 1970s and 1980s. We can go back to a report done in 1983 by Osmacher and McClendon. That was the beginning of H2M, or at least part of that firm was the beginning of H2M. They suggested at that time we replace the two water towers. Those water towers are both over 100 years old. Over 100 years old. There was actually a bond issue to replace the standpipe back in 2004. The city refunded the money and never built the new tower. There's got to be a political will. This has to be done politically. This is not going to be done by the experts. They're telling us what we've known since the 1970s. Nothing's new. We knew that we had to cover the holding tanks at Park Place. We discussed that in the early 2000s. We discussed all the issues that you brought up here, year after year after year, going back to the 1970s. This goes back to the people sitting in the front row here. You have to have the political will to budget these items, find the money, whether it's city money, state money, county money, federal money, you must find it. What kind of city will we have if we don't have clean water? We used to call ourselves America's healthiest city. And here we are today, 400 people concerned about drinking water. We know there are thousands that are concerned about this. We talked about putting additional filters on the water plant itself to get the iron out of the water. This is not a new issue. When I was city manager, I was given pills. This is true. I was given pills to give to the residents when they came up and complained about iron being in their laundry, that they should put these pills into the laundry, because the city council didn't want to spend $250,000 to put a filtration system in on the plant. These are not acceptable answers. Once again, it's up to you in the front row. I do appreciate all your knowledge. You're telling us everything we've known for years and expanded on it. And unfortunately, we're in the same situation we've been in since 1970. So please, elected officials, I'm glad that you called this hearing today. I respect that. That's a beginning, but we have to take it all the way to the end.
Just before we go to the next speaker, I just wanted to talk about the capital plan that was presented this year for the city. We have $500,000 this year to remove the standpipe, which is 110 years old. And we have $9.5 million in capital budget in year 2 to build a new tank. That tank will be a 1.25 million gallon tank. We've had the design report already approved by the Nassau County Health Department. We are going with a tank that will be very low maintenance. It will have a concrete stanchion. It will be an elevated tank, and it will have a glass infused tank on top, which will give us greater, will maintain our pressure better because it will be a narrower tank that, as your elevations will dictate your pressure in the system. And then before we paint the other tank, which is about 80 years old, the other elevated tank, we will, instead of spending $3 million to take that tank down. And the overall impact to the city will be that we will have actually 250,000 gallons more of storage in 2 modern tanks, and we will have very low maintenance costs going forward on maintaining those tanks. Also, we want to mention, I think there was some rumors going around that there was a secret meeting with Senator Kaminsky and us. I have to thank the senator. He got together with us. We have been putting in for grants on some of these items. There are Water Infrastructure Improvement Act grants, which we are applying for both that. At our treatment plant, we're applying for covers for our basins, and we have a preliminary design report already on that. Senator Kaminsky was kind enough to sit with us and put us in contact with the higher ups at the EFC and the New York State Department of Health to look at what other possible grant sources and financing there might be. So I expect with both our assembly person and our state senator that hopefully we'll get some funding to help these projects along. We also have a major project that we're getting ready to do in the walks. It's probably the oldest mains in the system. They're also very small, very narrow mains. They're only 6 inch, and those will be replaced with new services. So we do have a lot on the books to do, and the work is progressing.
Can I just jump in here real quick and tell you that unfortunately the situation you're describing here in the city of Long Beach is not unique to you. We have infrastructure challenges in those 3,000 municipal water systems all around the state because we were one of the first states to put in these systems, and unfortunately it's a considerable investment. I want to say that fortunately, Governor Cuomo and I know Senator Kaminsky has also championed the creation of a capital funding source, $3 billion that's available for municipalities to have that first down payment to help offset those capital costs so that you can do things like replace the tanks, accelerate the replacement of those 45 miles of water mains. It's estimated that there's $35 billion in infrastructure that needs to be replaced over the next 10 years. So that $3 billion is down payment. And we're fortunate to be in New York where we have a state that's actually standing up and making that fiscal commitment. Most states don't do that, and we're certainly not getting that from the federal government.
Our next speaker is Adam Feinberg.
Good evening. Thank you to the officials who helped organize this and the
Sorry, there we go. I thought it was long enough for this time. Thank you to the officials and the committee. You shared with us some valuable information. It's good to hear that there are some steps being taken. In full disclosure, I'm not a Long Beach resident, but my mom is a 5-year resident of the Granville Rehabilitation Center. And one of my concerns, of course, is the immuno-challenged, elderly, folks like that are more vulnerable to the problems with the water than the so-called more healthy residents. They're even vulnerable to some of the things that are in the water that we use to kill pathogens and other chemicals that are present in the water systems. Even though we need them there, they're still vulnerable. I'd be curious to know if it was the councilman who's got the whole home filtration system. Do you have groundwater? Say that louder.
No, but I didn't have it before.
Okay, fair enough. One of the things I'd like to see the senator advocate for, and hear comments from the panel, and this recurring theme here, I keep hearing 10 years, 20 years that these problems existed. You know, the governor before Cuomo, his father, you know, a lot of these water problems are not new. They've been happening for a long time. So I'd like to see the senator and even members of the panel support perhaps an informational session where a vendor or a group of vendors might be able to share with the residents who have the means to do so what the cost looks like if they don't want to wait for the bureaucratic government to finally get around to making the water the way it's supposed to be. That would be very helpful to the residents. Some of the residents have already taken matters into their own hands, and I'm sure some of the other residents might be curious to know about some of those systems, that they're more affordable and they can help when you don't want to wait for the government. The people in Bethpage, they're going to wait for the government, they're going to come. So that's all I have to say.
Just on that, just on that line, I'd like to make a suggestion. Somebody's been going around dropping off these free residential water testing programs. And just want everybody to be aware, this is what they're giving you to test your water. And they're telling you to do it for free. Every constituent we test for in the home, we spend $60,000 a year testing the water for various constituents. You can't do a sample for free and determine the quality of the water. This is a gimmick to try to self-filter that you may or may not need. So I would just want everybody, make sure you deal with a reputable firm and plumber, somebody that you trust, check with the Consumer Protection Board, make sure they're not,
If the government vets some of the potential sponsors or some of the potential vendors and has them qualify and submit to a rigorous.
Right, they should
that's-
get a license.
Right, that's who the residents should have, right. I agree with you, that little bottle is not enough to test for many of the.
Can I just add that we have numerous water experts from our team that are here. I know Don and his team are here. I'm sure we'll be around if you want to talk later about private solutions that are out there in the market, pros and cons. We've got plenty of engineers who'd be happy to sort of talk to you about that.
Okay, thank you.
Eileen Hession,
Yes.
Diane Hanson, after Ms. M, then we will have Mindy Delbert, please.
Good evening. I'd like to ask a question, that has not been asked. Over 10 years ago, it's about 10 years ago, I was asked, by a person who was living, at that time, I was living in a condominium, on Broadway, a large building. They had sent out a sample to a reputable laboratory, to look into the results of that lab on the water. They had a concern. I had a chemistry background, so I was somewhat active at this condominium. So they came to me. And one of the things I did with the results was to look at the raw data at that time that was produced here on the water quality, as you have referred to. And I noted that besides the high iron content, there was a higher manganese content with that iron. We'll continue that on the iron. and then was permitted. It actually slightly exceeded the level at that point in time at that location. And my question goes two parts. One, I appreciate why you had to elevate fluoride, with the E. coli problem. So my question is, with this higher level of chlorine, how do you think that might affect, if, I don't know, because I haven't looked at any of the data recently, quite frankly, this recent water problem brought this back to my mind. How it might have affected that, or will affect that, if the manganese at this point in time is elevated. And my concern about the manganese is when you do have manganese at a toxic level, I'm not saying it was at that level, obviously, you can see neurological and even behavioral problems in human beings. This is published. I went into the medical aspects of manganese when I found it elevated. So I understand the whole concept of why iron is here, with the aquifer. And my concern is, has anybody ever looked into manganese levels here? Are they of concern?
You mentioned raw water samples, so you looked at the raw water that comes up out of our wells.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
And there is iron and manganese in that
Right.
water. Okay,
Right.
so the process is the 8 wells that we have come to a central treatment plant.
Yeah.
When it gets to that treatment plant, the water is, we add lime to raise the pH.
Yeah.
We aerate the water to precipitate the iron and the manganese. Then we add alum to clump it. Then we run it through a settling tank so that all the iron and the manganese settles out. We remove that iron from the settling tanks and ship it to the wastewater plant. And then the water is finished through sand filters. So when the water leaves the system, and goes out into the system, it's very low concentration of iron and manganese, way under the standard. What you're seeing in iron and discolored water is actually coming from the online pipes in the system.
So you think that the manganese that was produced in that sample, the manganese originated in the pipes within that condominium?
Now, you said that the manganese levels and the iron levels you talked about were in the raw water.
No, well, yes, but also they came up in the sample, sent out after the water was drawn in the condominium and sent to a authorized laboratory.
When was that sample taken?
This is a long time.
A long time.
This is a long time. I can't speak of present, because to tell you quite frankly, I have not had the time nor the intellect quite, but I am seeing people talk about other issues of water, and I do follow water in the sense that I am familiar. I did on the North Shore follow concerns of the contaminants that we don't have, because I lived in the North Shore near a Superfund site.
Ms. Hannon, your time is up, please wrap it up in a sentence.
So I can tell you that iron manganese among all the other elements, contaminants in the water are tested again, as in the raw water and the treated water before it goes out to the system, but also out to the system. It's tested by the city and by the health departments. We know what's exactly in that water, and it's reported to you every year in your annual water quality report. So we're very confident that this meets the standard.
Thank you, Delbert.
Hi, thank you guys for having us, thank you neighbors for being here, and thank you guys for, thank you. Dr. Eisenstein, this actually is for you. You stated at the news conference with Clark Kern about the symptoms that you would have. With all due respect, sir, not everyone went to the doctor. And not everybody, not everybody went to the doctor. And I just would love for transparency here with the people that either online, people that are sitting here. And for those of you that are thinking that you don't want anybody to know, I'm gonna raise my hand. I did have symptoms and it was pretty severe, and I didn't go to the doctor because I just didn't think that it was because of the water. And it was really unbelievable to me to think that I'm living in America, in Long Beach, this could be happening to me. And I think to myself, why didn't I go to the doctor? I was thinking because I just couldn't believe that it was from the water. But then I started talking to different pockets of people all over Long Beach. And it was happening to them, and them, and them, and they too didn't go to the water. And I mean, they too were drinking the water, obviously, and they too didn't go to the doctor. So I know that you had said, based on the data, that people can, you know, eat the foodborne illness and all that, and it's high in the summer and everything. I just want you to realize that there are people that did get sick from the water. They didn't go to the doctor. So just by a show of hands, and I know people are raising their hands, they don't want their neighbors to know that they may have had the symptoms. Okay?
So, we acknowledge with any illness, there's a certain percentage of the population that don't seek medical care. We understand that the numbers are not perfect. All I can report on is the numbers that I can confirm. So, as far as the press conference of symptoms, one of the reporters asked me, what are likely symptoms? And so as the doctor, I provided likely symptoms, but I also say not everybody has them, the range. Some people get sick and are very mildly ill or not at all, and others can have very severe illness. So just giving people a guide as to what to look for, with the hope they will seek health care, because these can be dangerous infections. I'm happy you're better now. That's ultimately what we want, but we absolutely acknowledge that there's, in any illness, a certain percentage of the population that doesn't seek medical care, and they're not counted in. And that's why every year when the CDC talks about how many people got a certain disease or how many people died of a certain disease, it's an estimate based on, you know, what we see and what we know in the population. So I cannot disagree with you, and I have never said, no, we got sick from the water. What I've said is we haven't confirmed any cases, and that's all I have to work on is the science of what we can confirm. But by all means, we hope when people get sick and we're worried about a case like this, that they do seek medical care and they do make their healthcare provider or the health department aware so we can investigate. We spend thousands of hours each year investigating people who get ill. So I think your point is valid.
I just wanted you guys to be aware, and even Mr. Hernando to just be aware that there were definitely more pockets. It wasn't just in the center of town. There was definitely people in the West End and East all over the city.
Thanks for sharing that. I think you make a good point. The diarrheal illness is unfortunately common. There are lots of bacterial and viral and other non-communicable causes. We take that very seriously, and that's why we take such an aggressive approach with each case that's identified, knowing that there's other cases out there that are unreported to try and find the cause for the reported cases. I'll say the actions that were taken here with the water system in Long Beach were triggered because of findings in the water system, and really would not have changed at all if we found 1, 2, 3, or 4 cases. They're still all very protective, and we're designed to prevent any kind of illness from occurring. So ultimately, there may have been other cases out there that were unreported and undiagnosed. We still took we would have taken the same protective measures here in the city of Long Beach to require a boil water order, to increase the chlorination levels, et cetera. It wasn't prompted by the number of cases. So I know many of you are concerned with, well, is it 1, is it 2, is it 5 or 10? Regardless of how many are out there, we don't have any evidence at this point that any of them are definitively linked to the water system. A lot of the other information that I shared suggests that there wasn't a widespread problem with microbial contamination, but regardless, all the same actions would have been the same. We would have taken the same actions in Long Beach to increase the chlorine levels, to do the flushing, to put the boil water out, because our actions are not prompted by the number of cases. Our actions are prompted by those other controls. That's what I just wanted to tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Long Beach Councilmember Ernest Moore.
evening. Once again, thank you to all the members of the panel for all of your thoughtful answers. I believe tonight, we really came together as a group to really move forward with this issue. Just going to be brief because time is of essence. At the beginning of our conversation, there was a lot of information with respect to the importance of the samples, and I'd like to just go back there for a moment. Can you just explain briefly why was such a small sample size utilized to make determinations with respect to the data?
The requirements,
So it's in the state sanitary code. So if there's a total coliform positive, and one of the repeats is E. coli positive, there's no discretion. That becomes a tier 1 notice. It has to be boil water order until we get at least 2 consecutive rounds of sampling.
So in terms of the quantity of the size, for example, I think there were a lot of numbers. One number that was stated earlier was 55 samples. So again, because we have such a large population, I'm just wondering why the sample size was so low. And also, the number of samples that were used to determine if this was indeed positive or
So
negative.
that number of samples is in addition to the 40 routine samples at the time. So they're done throughout the community on consecutive days, and the health department is also collecting samples. We want to collect as much data as quickly as we can.
No, agreed, and that was my concern, that if you had 40 and then you added another 55, it's still relatively small because of our population size. So that's why I asked that question.
Well, the population size dictates how many routine samples we do. And just for clarification, there have been over 100 samples now that have tested negative since that one sample. And again, it sounds like, I'm not an epidemiologist, but it sounds like they're looking to find anything that's.
well, and I think the other point is, it has to be pursuant to an approved plan that's representative of the distribution system. The system here has not had a history of positive hits, so really, they've got 40 a month for a long period of time. You know, it really is more than adequate sample, especially when you factor in that it's an incredibly sensitive test. Even just a single hit, we take aggressive actions.
Thank you. Secondly, is there any medical research out there, any information with respect to the effects of long-term consumption of water with excessive iron levels?
I mean, I think right now, we do have what's called a maximum contaminant level for iron. It's primarily driven by aesthetic reasons. You know, what is the level at which consumers will be very dissatisfied?
I don't want to drink
It's
brown
much.
water, excuse me.
Please, silence, we have time for you to
Yes,
speak.
it's not our problem, we don't want to drink brown water.
But this
Let's hear
case,
one
we
more
have-
record.
Drink brown water,
Let's
that's
see what they
it.
have to say.
Please maintain decorum.
I think my point was that the levels that are required are set to make sure that consumers don't have problems with discoloration related to iron, and it really has less to do with health effects and more with making sure that the aesthetic quality is a product that's acceptable to consumers.
Okay, so in other words, we don't really have any data to support that the daily consumption of water that has excessive levels of iron in it in any way cause or create any other side effects for those individuals that are drinking it. Only because for several years, and this is before we have our Commissioner Miranda here, there were many residents that did call the city of Long Beach, and they were told that they should just leave the water running for at least 5 minutes, and that the water was safe. And so many residents just at a certain point just gave up, stopped calling. That's one of the main reasons why the calls that have been received here are so very, very low. So I just wanted to ask this question because I wanted us to understand what are some of the health risks associated with the content. I guess my third question would be, can anyone here confirm that the local hospitals denied residents the test for E. coli?
I certainly am not aware of that. We'll be happy to contact some of the healthcare providers to see if we can get to the bottom of that. I don't know why they would. I mean, if an individual is experiencing symptoms that could have potentially been E. coli, it's our experience that it would certainly do that, but we'll look into it. We've heard more than one
There were several residents, and obviously on social media, people were saying that they were being turned away, and so I just didn't know if we had any further data that stated that. Okay, and then, lastly, earlier we talked about cases that were flagged by your offices, so how long were these cases kind of flagged? Were they just like, a certain period of time, or, are cases still being recorded at this time? Are you looking at certain cases that are being found in our area with caution, being that this incident just happened within a month?
Specific to E. coli
Yes.
across the county, so that's something we monitor 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year in the whole county. So we actively, there are about 80 diseases, and Chickenpox producing E. coli is one of them that are reportable to us. Every time that comes in, we investigate the case. Sometimes we solve where it's from, what the cause is. Sometimes we don't. We try very hard to put together a link to identify the source and eliminate the source so that there's no further illness. We're not the ones who treat the patient, the medical providers do that. So we're constantly looking out, and when we have a case like this, we're hyper-vigilant. And so there's always monitoring going on, and with a disease like E. coli, we said earlier, one case is going to be great. We love if there were none, but the fact is that, as was said, there are hundreds across the state each year. There's dozens in the county each year, and we always try and find the source, and when we can find the source and eliminate it, one of the things we're doing in restaurants every day, inspecting restaurants, is making sure that proper techniques are used so that food sources are safe. For example, that temperatures are cooked to a high enough temperature so if there is a bacteria in it, it gets killed. But the monitoring for reportable diseases, all reportable diseases, including E. coli, never stops.
All right, and then last is just a communication question. Can you just talk to us briefly and just kind of give us an overview of the role of the Department of Health with respect to their communication with our Office for Emergency Management?
Are you referring to the county health department?
Yes.
So when we have a case like this that becomes large, then I immediately escalate it and get a great response. We put together a press gathering. The first thing that our administration does is reach out to the local administration here, explain to them what's going on, invite them in. They participated in our press conference, and in this case, our Office of Emergency Management played a role with the assistance of Governor Cuomo and the local elected officials. Thank you, Senator Kaminsky and Assemblywoman Miller, Legislator Ford, everybody. Water was brought down. It was a collaborative approach. Our Office of Emergency Management worked with City's Office of Emergency Management. But at the point that this becomes a multi-jurisdictional issue, the health department is going to focus on our relationship working together in collaboration with the state health department. We are an administrative branch in the state health department. But the Intergovernmental Affairs Office coordinates the intergovernmental jurisdictional discussion, and right away. So from the minute we found out about it, the press conference happened shortly after, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours after, something like that. The city manager here was at the lead was at the press conference, but certainly we were in full communication, and our Office of Emergency Management was available and participated, and so there were a lot of moving parts and a lot of jurisdictions, and we have people who that's their role to coordinate this together.
No, absolutely, and I thank you for your efforts. The reason why it's a question I understood, and I understood what you were going to say, but I wanted the residents to hear that information, because that was one of the challenges here during this incident, was communication, making sure that we could maximize that communication with as many residents as possible. And I thought it was important for people to hear this, because this information is being shared live. So again, I thank you for all of for the answers to your questions.
Welcome.
Anyone else? After the crisis in Flint, Michigan, the New York State Legislature passed and Governor Cuomo signed the Clean Water Infrastructure Act, which authorized $2.5 billion for clean water, and in the 2019 budget, this amount was increased to $3 billion. At least 1.5 of that $3 billion will be distributed to local municipalities through grants. And as chair of the Senate Environmental Committee, I thank Senator Kaminsky for advocating for us to get some of that money, and I hope
we can receive a portion of these funds. That money should be used to fix our pipes, which are very old, as Commissioner Miranda recently stated. We have more than 40 miles of pipes that are very, very old, and I think that we need to focus on improving those as organisms can get to them with our faulty pipes. This could cause poor groundwater. I think that we need to look at our water treatment plants, as was discussed earlier. We need to fix the valves, we need to fix other technology in our water treatment plants. I believe some money should go to that, as well as improving our 100-year-old water tower. These are just pressing issues, and even if we receive $50 million of that, 1.5 billion, that can do a lot. And I think we really need to press the state for a portion of those funds, because we're taxpayers, we deserve this money, and clean water is our right. And there are resources the state has, and we need to get in touch with those resources. These infrastructure improvements are not cosmetic. They are not something we want, but they are something we need. We deserve this money. We deserve clean water. There's a crisis in Long Beach, and it's not just E. coli. It's the brown water. It's people are getting sick from our water. This is an emergency. We have a chance to act now. We just need the funding to prevent us from becoming the new Flint, Michigan. So once again, I hope we can get the money so our water system can be improved. Thank you.
Senator Kaminsky.
Thanks, Mr. Berman. Just wanted to quickly address this, so we're all on the same page about this important issue. So what Commissioner Miranda said before, and just so we know, because the challenge is going to be on me, it's going to be on all of us, right? The infrastructure needs in Long Beach, like Glenn Spirit has said before, are so severe because nothing's been done for a very long time. There are cities like he talked about that we have open wells that aren't covered. That means right now, out there, they're sitting uncovered to the world. And after 9/11, there was a big push for municipalities to cover these things for good reasons. Rockville Center a few years ago, with the help of the state, we got $1 million so they could cover those wells. But they applied, they went out there and we fought for it and we got it. The city's capital budget this year was something about $7 million for everything. Beach maintenance, water, sewer, parks, everything was $7 million. Just this water tower is $9 million, right? So while I will fight like crazy, Denise Ford will fight like crazy for county money, Melissa Miller will fight up in the state, we can definitely do a part of this. But at some point, the citizens of Long Beach have to tell their elected officials, and this year you have an election where you have the maximum power to do that, to make the hard choices in the budget and put money where it has to go. I mean, if they've been talking since the 1970s about getting a new water tower that was built before my grandpa was born, then everyone's been abdicating their responsibilities to do this. And now, unfortunately, it may have taken a crisis for us to get to this point in order to do this together. What Commissioner Miranda was speaking about before was called, he mentioned very quickly, something called the EFC, it's the Environmental Facilities Corporation. They're a state agency that makes low-cost loans to municipalities to help fund major projects. There's also the water infrastructure money that you were just talking about that municipalities apply for. And yes, I've seen municipalities get $1 million here and $1 million there, sometimes $2 million. We could go a long way to do this. We will fight for every single penny. Believe me, we've already had meetings on this that were secret. We're gonna get as much of this done as we can, but it is going to take hard decisions right here that you're gonna have to demand to fund these projects. No one says one project should exceed all of last year's capital budget. We gotta find a constructive way to do this, and to have well caps that aren't capped and open to the weather and everything is, something we gotta work on. That's $1 million right there. So all of us pushing together can do this, Democrats, Republicans, every level of government, all of us working together. But it's going to take all of you telling people in the budget next year that this is what you want, and this is your priority, and we will fight really hard to get it together. I hope, we still have a lot to go at, more speakers today, but I hope this is the wake-up call that has us all rowing in the same direction to get us back on track where we need to be to have the healthiest water.
Hi. Thank you all for being here. We really do appreciate your answering all your questions. I just wanted to touch a little bit on what Councilman Moore had spoken about. One of the frustrations that I was hearing much of from many of the residents was not a they didn't feel that the lines of communication filtering down all the way to them were very open. And I think, especially, when, if you're there at the press conference or if you see it on TV, but otherwise, if you didn't happen to see the press conference, or if you're relying on social media, the city and the Department of Health have an obligation to make sure that the residents not just know about boil water alert, but what to do, how long to do it for, what to look for in terms of signs and symptoms of E. coli infection, if there were, if that was a concern. I know that the protocol calls for you wait for confirmation of an actual update of E. coli, but when it's out all over social media that there was, one or two cases of E. coli, the word is out, and people are scared, and they are reacting to that. And it would have gone a long way to have a little bit more communication directly with the people on the ground. The other thing that I really was just appalled by was my initial reaction, maybe because I have a disabled child, but initially this reach out to get the water out, and there was water here at City Hall, there were several sites to come and pick up water. My concern was, what about the people who can't get to you to get water, or can't carry the case of water? Where's the list, or where do we find out the people who are elderly, who are frail, who are disabled, who cannot get the water? And I was surprised to learn that there wasn't one. Callie from Senator Kaminsky's office, God bless this girl, she was literally taking tests and just going and buying water and delivering to people's homes. And that's ultimately, my husband and I were Facebook messaging and getting names and addresses. That's how we were delivering water to the frail and the disabled. That's not a very responsible system for us to support in the city. That's something moving forward that we also consider, putting together. And I understand that through privacy and other, it has to be voluntary. People have to volunteer to have their information on this list, but it's something, even for emergencies, that should be out there so that, especially me as an elected official, can get, so I can help those people. But again, I think more important that the communication, so that the people who are out living it on the ground and haven't been, watching TV or seeing the press conference, there should be some way to receive this information, to know what to do next time. Hopefully there's not a next time. Thank you.
Anyone stutter?
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. This is Long Beach Water, one of my neighbors who live here. I want to tell you why I'm here today, what's going on with the city, and what the situation is. So the reason why I'm here today and why I'm so sad is that someone did die. My dog died. About the water was on around the 28th where we had the boiling water. My dog died on July 2nd. He died of aspiration pneumonia. We were treating my dog from pneumonia. And I had no idea that because he threw up all day and aspirated his own vomit, he got pneumonia and he got sick and he died. Now, thank God for my neighbor who's in this Facebook group, Long Beach NY Water Quality, that I just discovered, because if it wasn't for them, I would know that my problem is not unique. So when I posted that my dog had aspiration pneumonia and I thought that he died because he got sick from E. coli about 3 days after the boil water alert was lifted, which, by the way, you did not tell people that E. coli has an incubating time, about 3 to 10 days. so people can, show symptoms 3 days, and some people up to 10 days after they get infected with E. coli, so that's important. After I told them, I heard from them, and you can go on Facebook page and read. Two of them are here. One had a daughter who got severely sick from E. coli. Another person had bleeding, diarrhea. The E. coli was so bad. Another person, her husband, also got some sort of pneumonia, which could have been from aspirating the water. We're not safe here. And Charlie from the water filtration department, is he here tonight? Okay, so there's the head of filtration department, his name's Charlie. He tested my water 2 days ago, and he didn't give me yet the results that he said he was going to call me back and give it to me. So my problem isn't unique, and this is a problem that we are encountering here, is that our city doesn't have the money to, even if we knew where the source of the E. coli is, which, by the way, you have not told us where the source actually is. So even if I wanted to independently test my water via an outside lab, which I was thinking about doing, somebody else said, what are you going to test for? It's full of chlorine. Oh, yeah. So there's so much chlorine that you can't find anything. And as soon as the chlorine goes down, the levels of chlorine goes down, if we can't find the source, how do we know that we're not going to get infected again and we're going to have another boil water scare?
Your time has expired, please wrap it up in a sentence.
You didn't show your hand that I had a few minutes left. Also, another person in the group had problems with aspirating. The chlorine air was so intense that the person had an asthma attack. And sir, from the Department of Health, you said you're trying to paint a pattern. If you don't get out of your office and start calling people, just like the Federal Reserve does when they get surveys for unemployment and for GDP and for the government, you have to call people and ask them, hey, are you okay? Did you get sick this week? Where is the cluster? You have not left your offices. You have not spoken to us. And all I heard here tonight is a bunch of academics, and I really appreciate your qualifications, which are amazing. All I heard tonight is people explaining away why we are wrong and why we should drink brown water because it's totally fine. And why you are not telling us that, okay, let's talk. Exactly what our
Ms. Sutter, your time has expired.
Exactly what Ms. Assemblywoman said, with the communication situation, we are not aware, this would be a packed room, if we weren't scared, if we had no idea
Ms. Sutter,
what's
we do
going
have a
on.
packed room, and I need the opportunity for everybody else to speak, so please step down from the podium.
Just 10 seconds more. Communications needs to improve. Donald Trump uses social media. The Supreme Court just ruled that social media is indeed a communications channel for the government. So you better start using it. All you gotta do is look at the Facebook feeds and see how many people are sick, and you'll get your answers and your pattern.
Kevin Callis.
It was my mother who turned away at South Nassau Urgent Care. Not European story, not hearsay. On June 24th, my mother stopped for Dr. Henner and started out to speak for her immediately. She had excessive diarrhea, she was disoriented for the whole weekend. Like everybody else in the bus. That's when I had her at 67. She got brought into intake, and the nurse there said to her, after this was all explained to her when she's there, we are not testing for E. coli. It's all in my mother's cigarette. That's that. How can we stand here and say only two people got sick when not only no one working for a Catholic speak to my mother, she's here, but I know over 20 other people who went to South Nassau Urgent Care and were also denied E. coli testing. How do My mother, prior to her alert, was diagnosed with E. coli at City MD. You have the name? Did they report it to you? I just got it for you.
We're happy to take that name
You
from
want
the
to take it?
after.
I called a couple times and you wouldn't let me self-report. CMG said it wasn't necessary. But it's two places. One of the two, right? We have Long Beach for emergency medical care. One didn't have asthma, one flat out refused to test for it. But I keep hearing this 1-2 number. That's not always bad. Why would our emergency care turn people away during the E. coli alert?
We'll be happy to follow up with City MD and South Mass Urgent Care to make sure that they're aware of all the reporting requirements and testing. I think without knowing the specifics about the case, I don't think we're in a position
So you
to.
can't answer the question. I don't want to lose my 3 minutes. You can't answer it?
I answered your question, sorry.
Melee, that was my daughter, 3 years old, who suffered an asthma attack. I took a shower. I still gave my daughter a bottle of water. I can't afford to do that for myself. 3 days after, maybe 4 days after, the alert was lifted, I took a shower. Steam, everything, came out of the shower, my daughter's on the ground gasping for breath. She's 3 years old. Maybe I missed it. I was calling warnings about possible side effects of the parade, but I didn't call. And you actually reported saying this in the media too. Some people are more sensitive than others. That's crap. You have South Denver here who was testing, and when asked why, he said, I don't know. You have City MD who didn't have tests. So we couldn't get the treatment we needed, and when you have, of course, the diarrhea, you're not going to drive 45 minutes away. You're going to go home. These are our options.
Ms. Carroll, your time's expired. Could you just wrap it up in a sentence or just?
I kind of thought that after the last meeting, and I think you guys got to talk a lot more than 3 minutes, so give me another minute. My mother got sick. My mother's been diagnosed with E. coli over 12 times since Hurricane Sandy. She doesn't have a compromised immune system. She's never had these issues before. She's been hospitalized with coli-related sepsis over 4 times. There's something wrong here. I get the politics, I get the words you have to say, and this and that. We're people. This is not our job. It's our job to take care of our family and our children, be able to bathe them, brush their teeth. Let's say hundreds of dollars on bottle of water. That's her job. It keeps saying the same thing over and over again, except during the alert. When I call the health department, that little line, he's 10 times. Same question, different answer every time. Pardon my friend, I don't know the filter. Shit show. I know it, all these people.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. If you want to say it after, I can get your information and hand it to the health department.
Are you calling back? You haven't come back yet. What are you doing online? I think you want me to have a little bit too. I just.
Yeah, Legislator Wood.
I'm sorry, I didn't sign in, so I apologize to whoever right now on holding back. But as a follow-up on the previous speaker, that is one of our biggest concerns during this, and Dr. Eisenstein, you know I expressed this to you, that when we have a suspected case of E. coli, when we think that it may be in the community, whether or not it's the water or whatever, and that's why we did this water alert. Aside from the communications, and that's something that we are going to address, speaking to Councilman Bendo, with our OEM, to make sure that we start the city, Long Beach OEM as well as Nassau County, to look at our communication methods, to make sure that we get out to everybody, especially those at home now. But I think one of my concerns was this, and I heard about the family in Winthrop, and I heard about somebody else who's being turned away, and this is my concern. That why aren't these hospitals and these emergency rooms, maybe we need to go back out to them and do some sort of a forum with them, or like you have to be certified, even with your water and the testing and everything like that, to go back and review with all of these emergency rooms, that when we have these type of cases come in, this is the protocol that they must follow. Maybe they're forgetting this, maybe they're dismissing it, because they go, well, all right, it's maybe one small area in Long Beach. Why would somebody in the West End have E. coli, really, if it was a pump or well at Grand Street? if South Nassau, if City MD, or any, and if Winthrop fail to follow protocol, I expect this to be investigated. And I'm asking you on behalf of myself and our other elected officials and the residents here, that we are, I would like to have it fully investigated to find out what happened. Take the names of all the people who said that they went to these emergency rooms, they were turned away, or for whatever reason, find out, is there miscommunication, what happened? Because this is something that I hear, that I want to make sure that if we have some sort of a system like this, that these hospitals are on high alert and that they take the necessary precautions, and these people should have been routinely tested, even if they didn't have bloody diarrhea. And I'm sorry to be so basic, but I expect to hear the results of this report, and I thank you very much.
Mr. Goby?
I have a few questions, clarifying questions. Maybe Mr. Miranda it is. There's 8 wells. Can you tell me where the locations of the wells are? Yeah, they're located throughout the system. There's one on 11th. There's one on Maple. There's 3 on the main plant property on Park Place. Kevin, help me out. Lafayette Boulevard and one by Recreation Center. Okay, the one that tested positive, was that the one? None of the wells. None of the wells tested positive, none of the tanks tested positive. So where was the positive? The positive sample, the first sample, the total telephone sample came from the sampling tap on Grand Boulevard. Okay, that triggered the follow-up samples, the upstream and downstream. One of the upstream sample came back, all forms of E. coli. That was the only sample out of over 100 samples now that showed an E. coli. And from what the state says, there wasn't enough there to even show that there was, that's culturally done. So the overall quality of the water, this really was very isolated incident. I know people don't want to hear that, but it was.
The up and downstream, those were residential testing?
Those were residential hotels testing.
What is the threshold, I forget the name, I apologize, but for E. coli, like in terms of numbers, the threshold is like thousands, hundreds of thousands of bacteria, which is,
No,
what's the number?
It's not explained, that the test is so sensitive, it can detect a single organism.
One bacteria.
It can detect that.
Okay. So we don't know what the total number was on the positive test, or we did?
Well, the state tried to throw it out, and they weren't able to throw it out, so obviously, it's extremely problem.
It's a very sensitive test, and one of the recommendations we have to the city is that they pursue some additional testing, something called heterotrophic plate counts. It's something that it's more quantifiable, so we have a sense for over a longer period of time, if there is bacteria present, what the numbers are.
Right.
Just additional data.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but the normal initial test was from a sample cap, you called it?
The initial, for the total
Cap, but that could be a mix of various bacteria, not necessarily E. coli, correct?
Correct, total coliform is like a crude grouping of
Right, okay. And then the E. coli is a secondary test when the total coliform comes out positive, but that's an enzyme test. They try to grow it in the lab. Is it possible that there could be a sugar toxin E. coli that was present, but for whatever reason they couldn't grow it in the lab from that sample? Is that possible? And what's the likelihood?
First, they were all enzyme tests that sort of triggered the alert.
Right.
We did attempt to then grow.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
That's right, and we weren't sure anything's possible, but like I said, the constellation of information we have aren't consistent with there being microbial contamination in the water system.
Okay. So was that it was a sample cap, now, how many wells are open?
None of our wells are open.
Oh, I think
Yeah,
I thought I missed it, maybe I missed
somebody, I think this.
Oh, okay, so none of the wells are open?
None of the wells are open, all the wells are sealed with sanitary seals. When we treat for iron, we aerate it, and then we settle it in settling basins. We have settling basins that are open air settling basins. But even after that iron is settled, that water still goes through a closed, high-pressure sand filter before it's put into storage and treated, so.
One of the recommendations we made was to pursue covering that
Yeah.
settling basin, but we really didn't think that was a potential source.
But we don't have open wells at all.
No, there's no open wells.
Just for myself, so.
And The recommendation on the sediment basins, back in December, the city council authorized a study, and actually design, so that we could go out to bid to cover those tanks. And it is one of the projects that we are applying for a grant for, that will offset costs.
And then I just have one more, I think, for the doctor. What is it, when they come in and you got symptoms, let's say possibly E. coli poisoning, what do they test? Do they test your diarrhea, your blood, or, and is the test expensive? Because if you're turning people away, it sounds kind of odd.
I don't,
Is it a very inexpensive test to do?
I don't know the price of the test, and, you know, when you.
What do they test?
So somebody shows up to an emergency room, CMD, whatever it is, the doctor or whoever's seeing the patient, physician assistant, whatever it is, creates based on the symptoms and their evaluation, they create a differential diagnosis. And then they order tests based on that differential diagnosis. It could be a blood test, it could be stool tests, if we're looking at gastrointestinal.
So it could be a combination.
Right, and the, you know, 99.9% of the gastrointestinal visits to emergency room are not E. coli. But we expect that the medical providers, especially in an emergency room setting or in an emergent situation, would have done appropriate testing, and I think that we are in agreement that we want to.
They're not expensive tests, they would have been reimbursed for them, we want to explore more what could have contributed to them not pursuing testing.
Does heavy precipitation with runoff maybe from areas, is that like a possible cause of this particular?
Well,
Like, where does this,
it could be a cause at the sampling site, you know, when we have heavy rain, you know, because the sampling site itself could have been contaminated.
But this is a groundwater system, so typically, you know, that kind of storm runoff, which might be a problem with other surface water systems. Right.
okay, so we still don't know why.
The water that's running out of the White Aquifer probably ended in the aquifer 400 or 500 years ago.
No, I know that part, but I'm saying we don't know why the sample tested positive. And then it didn't test positive again, which is
No,
good,
we undertook a comprehensive review, we didn't have any obvious sanitary defects. You know, it's always a problem with collection of samples. However, as we mentioned, and John covered a little bit, they are required to complete comprehensive assessment. The city has done one, they've also now required to have an independent contractor complete that assessment, to look at all the potential contributing factors and make some recommendations to the city, county, and state.
But the one that would cause. Yeah, I'm sorry, okay, thank you. Did you just speak to E. coli, I believe it's 0157, that's the one that's most common? Is that, or not? That's not correct?
No, E. coli 0157 is not the most common, it's typically rare, but it is, it is the most dangerous.
Okay.
So it's not, thankfully, not the most common.
But that could be in foodborne or waterborne, the 0157, or any of them could be.
Most of the E. coli outbreaks that we have in our current era are associated with foodborne sources. You know, there were some really high profile 0157 outbreaks associated with ground beef and other products. And all of those investigations that we conduct, when we find those clusters, they're almost all related to food sources when we're able to find the cause.
But any of the E. coli is going to the animal waste, correct? Some variation is coming from either us or agricultural, and it's not just appearing out of nowhere, correct?
The bacteria live in lots of places, including our guts, you know, and it transmitted through fecal oral route.
Summers, environmental, multiple soil.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you very much.
Well, I think.
Roy Lester, Long Beach. I've been listening for 2.5 hours. You guys just don't get it. It's a credibility issue here. And people are coming up and they just don't believe you. You know, I'm hearing time and time again, oh, you know, might have been contamination, it would, you know, we did hundreds of tests, nothing showed up. There's no question that there were lots, dozens, if not maybe 100 or more people that went to the emergency room, that went to the healthcare places and stuff like that. They were all sick, okay? Maybe they didn't have E. coli. Maybe it wasn't related. but the people in Long Beach were sick. And you guys are kind of saying, no, that's not related, it doesn't happen, it didn't happen. That's not what we want to hear. Something went wrong. There were 12 recommendations. I mean, John, you said it, you know, our valves weren't right. You know, you talk about the open water, there's no open water wells, but there's open water leaching tanks.
Settlement basins.
Yeah, and that water goes back into the system, doesn't it?
You know, boy.
John, I ask you a question. Does that water go back into the system?
That water, after it goes to the open basins, is treated through high pressure.
Right, it goes back into the system. So if a bird flies over and pokes in it, it goes back into the system.
The filters can't go out.
Okay.
We have no positive samples.
No, I know, John, you keep saying that. You
Well,
keep
you know
saying that.
something, you keep,
And that's why
you're questioning my credibility. I am listening. I'm questioning my credibility. And
No, I'm not.
You know what I'm going to do? Lie?
No, I'm
And
not
say that there was some
questioning.
issue that there isn't?
I'm not questioning your credibility, not at all. I know you, John, okay? I'm saying that the people here are trying to give you a message. They're not satisfied with the water. You say, well, maybe, you know, this is just to sell you a filter, maybe you need a filter, maybe you don't need a filter. When you look at our page, our water page, you look at the number of contaminants in our water, it's ridiculous. You look at how much treatment our water needs. We put iron in it, we put stuff to take the iron out, we have iron, we put chlorine in it, we put a lot of things. I would never think of drinking Long Beach water that doesn't go through a filter. Now, I'm not saying that it's not the best in the world. You know, I know that I grew up in Point Lookout and we never questioned our water, never. And I moved to Long Beach and I right away got a filter. But come on, John, listen to people. That's all I'm asking.
Listen, let's be information, don't look out. Treat their water exactly the way we treat our water.
And you know what? And they didn't have a problem. Okay, I know I'm on stuff. Thank you.
Carl, right here. Apologize for Mr. Nesta. Harvey Magier. Bill Gray. Bill Gray. And Mike Gibbons. Mike Gibbons, anyone? Going, gone? All right, that concludes our meeting.
Hey, can I just say thank you all for coming. We have several people here from the State Health Department. Can you just raise your hands, folks? They're around. Not everyone's comfortable with coming and standing in front of a microphone and offering your question. If you are that introvert and you want to get a question answered, please, we'll be around for a little bit and happy to entertain additional questions. Thanks for coming.